Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to look at a paradox that defines the entire modern world. A story not just about steel and wood, but about the very nature of how we survive in an increasingly fragile reality. Look at the objects we depend on every day. We live in an era that worships absolute precision and complex digital systems. From the glossy glass of the smartphone in your pocket to the tiny drones patrolling the skies, our civilization has become obsessed with a very specific and very dangerous kind of perfection. We build machines measured in micrometers and nanoseconds. These devices are marvels of human intellect capable of processing billions of calculations in an instant, yet they possess a fatal weakness we rarely dare to admit. They are extremely fragile. A drop of water on a circuit board, a single grain of sand inside a high-tech sensor, or a minor software bug buried in millions of lines of code can turn a billion-dollar asset into a pile of useless plastic and silicon. We have traded resilience for sophistication, and in doing so, we have built a world that only works perfectly under perfect conditions. Now, contrast that fragile elegance with the object in front of us. It is not beautiful in the conventional sense. It has none of the aerodynamic curves of a modern fighter jet, nor the polished casing of a luxury watch. It is a crude, even clumsy assemblage of stamped metal, worn wood, and rough iron. This is the Automat Kalashnikov of 1947, known to the world as the AK-47. To the eyes of a modern Silicon Valley engineer, this machine looks like an antique, or as some have called it, industrial waste from a bygone era. It was forged in the desperation following World War II by a Soviet Union that had no time for aesthetics. It only needed results. And yet, decades later, this rifle remains the most dominant weapon on the planet. It has outlived the empires that produced its rivals and continues to function in environments that can paralyze the most advanced technologies of the 21st century. This is the great paradox of the AK-47. It is a masterpiece of efficiency precisely because it rejects the modern obsession with microscopic tolerances and exquisite precision. The AK-47 reaches its zenith in the paradox of simplicity. While the rest of the world moved toward greater complexity, Mikhail Kalashnikov went in the opposite direction. He understood a truth we often forget in our climate-controlled comfort, that on the battlefield of life, the greatest enemy is not the opponent but the environment itself. War is dirty, wet, and chaotic. It is a place of mud, sand, and blood. Under such conditions, the perfect machine is the one that refuses to break. This weapon was designed with a survival philosophy that assumes everything will go wrong. It assumes the soldier will be exhausted, the weather will freeze, and maintenance will be non-existent. By looking at this rifle, we are not just seeing a piece of military history, we are seeing a mirror reflecting our own modern fragility. We surround ourselves with smart things that stop working the moment they get dirty. The AK-47, by contrast, was born in the mud and designed to live there forever. As we delve deeper into the genius behind this legendary mechanism, we must ask ourselves a difficult question. In our pursuit of the next digital frontier, have we lost the ability to create things that truly endure? Have we become so focused on how many features it has that we forgot to ask, does it work when I need it most? The AK-47 stands upright like a cold steel witness to a simple truth. When everything else collapses, when the power goes out and the satellites fall from the sky, the simplest tool is the one that remains. It is a legend, not because of what it can do in a laboratory, but because of what it refuses to stop doing in the real world. Over the next 30 minutes, we will dismantle this immortal scrap of metal and discover why, in a world of fragile perfection, the king still wears a crown of rusted iron. To truly understand the paradox of simplicity, we must turn back the clock to the darkest hours of the 20th century. Imagine the Eastern Front in 1941, a landscape of shattered steel, frozen mud, and the stench of gunpowder. It was here, amid the catastrophic ruins of the Battle of Bryansk, that a young tank commander named Mikhail Kalashnikov found himself lying in a hospital bed. His shoulder was shattered, his tank reduced to a burned-out husk, and his mind haunted by the screams of fleeing comrades. This is where the story of the AK-47 begins. Not in the clean, quiet halls of a prestigious university, nor in the theoretical calculations of a scientist who had never seen a bullet fly. It began with the ears of a wounded soldier. As Kalashnikov lay in that hospital, he did not hear discussions of grand strategy or geopolitical objectives. He heard the raw, unfiltered complaints of infantrymen. These men were not asking for high-precision optics or sophisticated firing modes. They were cursing their weapons. They spoke of rifles jamming at the first sign of the Russian winter of mechanism so delicate that a single grain of sand from a trench rendered them useless. They were dying not from a lack of courage, but because their tools had betrayed them in the very environment they were forced to survive in. To Kalashnikov, this was not a technical problem. it was a moral one. He realized that the existing Soviet arsenal, the slow, bolt-action Mosin Nagant, and the fast-firing but weak PPSH-41 submachine gun left a deadly gap. At the critical engagement distance of 300 meters, one was too slow, the other too weak. This realization ignited the first pillar of the paradox we are discussing. True simplicity is born from an obsession with human survival. Kalashnikov approached the design of a new weapon not as an artist seeking beauty, but as a mechanic seeking reliability for ordinary men. He knew that on the battlefield, a soldier's hands would tremble from frost and fear. He knew there would be no clean workbenches or specialized lubricants. He understood that sophistication was a luxury that those facing death could not afford, and so he resolved to create a weapon that was unforgiving of every soldier's mistake. He began stripping away everything that was not truly essential to the act of firing. He was not just designing a machine, he was designing a guarantee. The genius of this approach lies in the very heart of the paradox of simplicity. To create something truly simple, one must possess the intelligence to navigate immense complexity and then choose to discard it. Adding features is easy. Removing them until only the soul remains is extraordinarily difficult. Kalashnikov studied the best designs of his era, the German STG-44, the American M1, Garand, but he did not try to surpass them by making things more complex. Instead, he distilled them. He combined a long-stroke gas piston with a rotating bolt, but he did so with a roughness that prioritized function over form. He ignored traditional craftsmanship rules that demanded tight, precise fitting of parts. He was building a weapon for the mud of his homeland. This brings us to a core value we often overlook in modern life: empathy in design. Because Kalashnikov had bled on the front lines, he designed a weapon that respected the reality of its user. He did not ask the soldier to adapt to the weapon. He made the weapon adapt to the harshest reality of the soldier. In today's world, we are often forced to adapt to technology, learning complex interfaces, protecting fragile screens, and carrying backup batteries. We serve our machines. The AK-47 is the opposite. It was designed to serve humans, even if that human was a recruit who had never held a rifle before. It was a tool created by a soldier for soldiers, forged in the fire of a war that proved, when life is threatened, the only thing that matters is that it works. We now arrive at the strangest chapter of the story, a mechanical truth that contradicts everything we are taught about quality today. If you pick up a modern high-end rifle designed for elite special forces, you will feel a machine as tight as a surgical instrument. There is no rattle, no looseness between parts. Metal surfaces fit together so precisely that not even a hair can slip through. This is what we call tight tolerances. In the consumer world, we equate this tightness with excellence. We want car doors to close with a solid thud and laptop hinges to move with smooth, silent resistance. But in the world of the AK-47, this kind of perfection is considered a deadly trap. Mikhail Kalashnikov looked at Western engineering precision and saw a flaw. He understood that when you build a machine with no gaps, you build a machine with no room for the real world. This brings us to the mechanical heart of the paradox of simplicity, the concept of loose tolerances. When you shake an AK-47, it rattles. The bolt carrier wobbles inside the receiver. The safety lever feels rough. To the untrained eye, it looks like a poorly made product, the result of a sloppy Soviet factory with low standards. But this looseness is actually a calculated high-level engineering strategy. It is the deliberate creation of a gap, a place where the enemies of the machine can be neutralized. Think about what happens in the heat of battle. A soldier dives into a mud-filled trench. Dust from an explosion fills the air. Carbon fouling from hundreds of fired rounds builds up inside the chamber. In a precisely built weapon, these foreign objects have nowhere to go. They become trapped between tight metal surfaces, creating friction, then heat, and finally complete mechanical paralysis. The perfect rifle suddenly becomes a useless iron club. The AK-47, however, operates on a different logic. Kalashnikov designed the internal components with large clearances. He gave dirt a place to live without interfering with the gun's movement. When sand enters an AK-47, the large gaps allow the grains to be pushed aside into dead zones. The main path of the bolt remains clear. The rifle does not fight the mud, it coexists with it. This is the power of the gap. By leaving room for imperfection, Kalashnikov created a machine that is functionally superior in the real world. It is a profound lesson for our 21st century lives. We expend enormous energy trying to eliminate every gap in our schedules, every flaw in our systems, and every imperfection in our plans. We crave a life optimized to 100%, but a system with no tolerance for error is a system that will shatter the moment it encounters an unexpected obstacle. The AK-47 teaches us that resilience comes from having space to absorb the chaos of existence. It is the loose parts that allow the entire machine to keep moving forward when conditions turn harsh. To reinforce this strength, Kalashnikov paired those loose tolerances with an enormous amount of excess gas. When the rifle fires, a massive surge of high-pressure gas slams into the long stroke piston with the force of a mule's kick. It does not merely move the bolt, it drives it rearward with brutal power. This is not elegant engineering, it is the philosophy of overwhelming reliability. If there is rust, the piston smashes through it. If there is thick grease, the piston plows through it. The AK-47 does not ask permission to cycle, it forces the cycle to happen. This is the ultimate expression of the paradox of simplicity. By accepting a little looseness and roughness, you gain a freedom and power that perfection can never achieve. In a world of fragile precision, the king is the one with enough space to breathe through the mud. The true measure of any philosophy is not how good it sounds in a lecture hall, but how it performs under the crushing weight of reality. For the AK-47, that reality was the jungles of Vietnam, where it became the ultimate testing ground for the paradox of simplicity. In the mid-1960s, the world witnessed a clash not just of ideologies, but of two fundamentally different approaches to technology. On one side stood the American M16, a marvel of aerospace-era engineering. Built from lightweight aluminum and advanced polymers, it was designed for surgical accuracy and high-velocity impact. It was the future. On the other side was the AK-47, the immortal scrap made of heavy steel and wood. On paper, the M16 was the superior machine. It was more accurate, lighter, and more sophisticated. But the jungle does not read blueprints. The wet, rain-soaked environment of Southeast Asia was a nightmare for high-precision engineering. The M16's tight tolerances, which made it extremely accurate on a clean firing range, became its greatest weakness in the mud. The weapon required constant, meticulous cleaning with specialized tools and lubricants that were often unavailable in the chaos of firefights. A small spot of rust or a buildup of carbon in its fragile gas system would cause the rifle to jam often, at the exact moment a soldier needed it most. American soldiers found themselves in life or death battles with a modern rifle that had turned into a useless club. Meanwhile, their opponents carried AK-47s that had been dragged through swamps, buried in dirt, and submerged in rivers. When the trigger was pulled, the AK-47 fired, every single time. This led to one of the most astonishing validations of Kalashnikov's genius. USC Special Forces, the most highly trained elite units in the world, began doing the unthinkable, discarding billion-dollar modern M16s to pick up the crude rifles of fallen enemies. They chose the weapon of the peasant over the weapon of the scientist. This choice was a profound admission that in survival situations, reliability is the only currency that matters. The paradox of simplicity proved that a tool that is 70% effective, but works 100% of the time, is infinitely more valuable than a tool that is 100% effective but works only 50% of the time. The AK-47 did not need to be better than the M16 under ideal conditions. It only needed to be tougher in chaos. This chapter of history teaches us an important lesson about the value of resilience. In modern life, we often chase the best version of everything: the fastest processor, the most complex software, the most intricate strategy. We optimize for the best case scenario, but the stress test reminds us that we should optimize for the worst case scenario. When the rain begins to fall in your business career or personal life, the sophisticated systems you have built may be the first to clog and fail. The AK-47 survived the jungle because it was designed to expect the jungle. It does not resist the environment, it integrates with it. The AK-47's victory in the mud was not just a military triumph, it was a conceptual one. It proved that simple does not mean crude. Simplicity is a strategic choice. By choosing to prioritize the bolt cycle over the beauty of shot grouping, Kalashnikov ensured his creation would become the most reliable tool in human history. It reminds us that when the world becomes messy, and it always does, the person with the simplest, roughest plan is often the one who emerges from the jungle. When we look at the AK-47 today, we must recognize that its ugliness is actually its greatest armor. It is a weapon tested by fire and emerged cold hard and ready for more trials. When a design becomes so simple that anyone can use it, it ceases to be merely a tool and becomes a catalyst for social change. This is the fifth phase of the paradox of simplicity. Because the AK-47 erased barriers of complexity, it accomplished something profound. It democratized power. In the decades after its creation, this rifle traveled far beyond Soviet borders. It found its way into the hands of revolutionary movements, liberation fronts, and ordinary people across the globe. It became the primary tool for those who possessed nothing but a desire for sovereignty. Look at the flag of Mozambique. It is a striking and controversial image, the silhouette of an AK-47 with a bayonet crossed with a hoe and placed atop an open book. To many in the West, seeing a modern assault rifle on a national flag is disturbing, even frightening. But to the people of Mozambique, this object represents the very core of their survival. It was the tool that allowed a colonized population to rise up against a technologically superior European power. The hoe represents agriculture, the book represents education. And the AK-47 represents the security required for the first two to exist. It is a chillingly honest admission. Without the ability to defend life with a reliable tool, books and crops can be taken away in an instant. The presence of the AK-47 on a flag is the ultimate proof of Kalashnikov's unforgiving philosophy. Because this rifle requires almost no formal education to operate, it leveled the playing field. It leveled the balance between the professional soldier and the motivated civilian. You do not need to graduate from a military academy to understand how to load, aim, and fire this weapon. In the hands of a farmer defending his land or a revolutionary in the mountains, the AK-47 becomes an equalizer. This is the socio-political dimension of the paradox we are discussing. Simplicity is not only mechanical, it is about accessibility. When power becomes accessible, the structure of the world changes. This accessibility created a new kind of global identity. The AK-47 became a symbol of defiance against the status quo. It appeared in street art in occupied cities and propaganda posters of countless movements, and eventually in Western music and cinema. It became a cultural icon, a brand of rebellion. Yet this success carried a profound moral weight. When a tool is too easy to replicate and cannot be destroyed, it spreads like a biological entity. The same simplicity that made it a tool of liberation also made it the preferred instrument of chaos. As we analyze this shift, we uncover the value of universal design. In today's digital age, we talk endlessly about user experience and making things intuitive. We want our apps to be so simple that even a toddler can use them. But the AK-47 is the original master of intuitive design. It proves that if you make something simple enough for anyone to use, eventually everyone will use it for better or for worse. It reminds us that the tools we create carry their own politics. The AK-47 did not just change how wars were fought, it changed who could fight them. It gave a voice to the voiceless, but that voice spoke in the language of 7.62mm bullets. As we approach the penultimate chapter of the paradox of simplicity, we must confront the darkness that hangs over this legendary design. There is a painful irony in creating something that works too well. Mikhail Kalashnikov designed a rifle to defend the borders of the motherland, a tool for young men standing guard in white snow. But because he succeeded in making it too simple, too rugged, and too easy to manufacture, the AK-47 escaped his control and became a global fire. This is the dark side of the paradox. When a weapon is immortal, the chaos it can create is also immortal. In his later years, Kalashnikov lived a modest life in the city of Ijevsk. He was a quiet man, but he was haunted by a spiritual burden that no metal could compensate for. He looked out at the world and saw his invention used by child soldiers in Africa, by drug cartels in Mexico, and by rebels in every corner of the globe. Because the rifle never breaks, it never leaves the battlefield. A rifle produced in a Soviet factory in 1955 can be sold and resold 10 times submerged in a swamp for a decade, and then picked up today to take another life. Most machines have a lifespan. The AK-47 only has a cycle of movement. It is the eternal gun, and for its creator, that became a source of profound moral pain. This leads us to a crucial realization about the responsibility of design. In the modern tech world, we often celebrate disruptive innovations without considering their long-term consequences. We create algorithms that spread information instantly, or software that automates human labor, and we marvel at their efficiency. But like Kalashnikov, we often forget to ask what happens when this tool falls into the wrong hands. What happens when the simplicity I create is used to destroy the very things I meant to protect? The AK-47 is a masterclass in efficiency, but it is also a warning that efficiency is morally neutral. It does not care who pulls the trigger. The bitterest irony came in the 1980s during the Soviet war in Afghanistan. The very nation that gave birth to the AK-47 sent its soldiers into the harsh valleys of Afghanistan, only to face storms of bullets from the Mujahideen. The resistance fighters used thousands of AK-47 variants, some captured, some supplied by third parties, some forged in tribal workshops. The Soviet army found itself bled dry by the genius of its own son. A weapon designed to defend the motherland had become the primary instrument of its humiliation. This is the ultimate paradox of simplicity, a design so perfect for survival that it ensures the survival of your enemy just as effectively as your own. In his final letters to the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kalashnikov asked whether he bore responsibility for the deaths caused by his gun. He wondered whether, by making the act of killing mechanically simple and reliable, he had inadvertently increased the total amount of human suffering. It is a question every innovator in the 21st century should reflect on. When we strive for simplicity, are we making the world better or merely making it easier to break? The AK-47 remains a miracle of engineering, but it is a miracle that weighs heavily on the soul of history. It proves that simplicity is a double-edged sword. The easier a tool is to use, the less control you have over the legacy it leaves behind. We have traveled a long journey from the blood-soaked hospitals of World War II to the humid jungles of Vietnam, and finally into the moral dilemmas of the creator's final years. Now we stand in the present, a world dominated by digital boundaries. As we conclude this exploration of the AK-47, we must ask, what does this relic of steel and wood have to teach us today? We are surrounded by smart devices, artificial intelligence, and systems so complex that no single human truly understands how they work from end to end. Our technology has become a black box magical when it works, incomprehensible when it fails. In that context, the AK-47 is not just a weapon, it is a profound philosophical reminder. The paradox of simplicity suggests that as the world becomes more complex, the real value of simplicity and roughness increases. We are currently building a civilization so optimized that it is extraordinarily fragile. We rely on global supply chains that must operate with zero-delay software that requires constant updates and sensors that demand perfect conditions. We have forgotten the lessons of the power of the gap and loose tolerances. When we look at the AK-47, we see a tool designed for the dirty world, the world as it actually is, not the world as we wish it to be. It teaches us that true genius lies in creating systems that can absorb chaos rather than systems that attempt to ignore it. In our own lives, we can apply AK-47 thinking to how we build our careers, our businesses, and our personal resilience. Instead of chasing the most complex expert hacks or the latest high-tech trends, perhaps we should seek 7.62mm solutions. These are simple, reliable habits and tools that work even when we are tired, stressed, or in danger. The AK-47 reminds us that in any survival scenario, whether a business crisis or a personal hardship, the person with the simplest, most reliable plan often outlasts the one with the most sophisticated theory. Complexity is often a mask for fragility. Simplicity is the ultimate armor. The masterpiece of Mikhail Kalashnikov has reached its final form. It is a design that has reached the stopping point of efficiency. There is almost nothing left to remove, and adding anything would only make it less reliable. It stands as a silent witness to a fundamental truth of human nature. No matter how hard we strive toward the stars and the vast digital realm, we remain creatures of the earth, of mud, and of friction. As long as human conflict remains a reality of existence, this immortal scrap will continue to find its way onto battlefields. It is the tool that still stands when the lights go out. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the soul of the AK-47. If you found value in this exploration of history, mechanics, and philosophy, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support allows this channel to continue digging into stories that sit at the crossroads of history and technology. What is your AK-47? The one simple thing in your life that never lets you down? Let us know in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, keep your plans simple and your spirit resilient. Goodbye.